the meeting and start the YouTube. Oh, it's there.
Give it a second. The thing pops up just a second before, but
Do I have to say got it?
Yeah, but be careful. Make sure that you click in the right place. Good evening. I'm Michelle Rehill. I'm the chairperson of the Northborough Library Board of Trustees. And before we begin our meeting, I will read this following statement. This open meeting of the Library Board of Trustees is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of the June 16th, 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the Library Board of Trustees are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the Library Board of Trustees to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. Members, I shall call your name. A roll call for attendance. Please respond when I say your name. Wait, do I call the meeting to order now? Sorry. Mitch, tell me.
Yes.
Yes, I would suggest calling the meeting to order and then doing the roll call.
All right, I do this every time. We'll call the meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. and we'll do the roll call. Mitch Cohen,
Mitch Cohen, aye.
Mary Crowley,
Mary Crowley here.
Jim Hogan,
Jim Hogan, aye.
Nita Karanjkar is not here. Charles Recchia also not here. Joan Scott,
Joan Scott here.
Richard Tucker,
Richard Tucker here.
and I'm Michelle Rehill, am here. And tonight we also have with us Library Director Jen Bruno and a liaison to the Select Board, Scott Rogers. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Having gone through the formalities, I would accept a motion to approve the minutes of the February 8th meeting.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right, thank you. And again, by roll call for approval of the minutes of the February 8th meeting, Mitch Cohen,
Mitch Cohen, aye.
Mary Crowley,
Approved. Aye.
Jim Hogan,
Jim Hogan, aye.
Joan Scott,
Joan Scott, aye.
Richard Tucker,
Richard Tucker, aye.
and I, Michelle Rehill, say aye. Report carries and is approved unanimously. Thank you. Next item, the FY 22, is that right? Appropriations report. So for this current fiscal year, looking at the February numbers, were there any questions or comments that anybody had about the appropriations report?
I had a quick comment. Just to draw your attention for a minute to the very last item, the new equipment. We did successfully replace and install our new server for the public computers. We also had to update our router for our CW Mars internet line, which I think might have been slated for next year, but we ended up doing it this year because we were having some issues with it. So the line item is over budget a little bit. We're not super concerned about it, and that should, I don't want to jinx myself, but that should be the last big expense for technology.
Just hoping.
Now that I've said that.
Thank you. Did anybody have any questions for Jen about that report? If not, then we will move on to the library director's report.
What
Yep.
would you like me to tackle first? A lot of stuff in here.
There is a lot.
Since we were just on finances, how about talk about the budget? I'm just looking in the order of the PDF, so that's easier for me.
Sure.
Follow along.
All right, so I have some notes before anybody asks questions, and they may clarify some questions. So I'm just gonna go down. Well, let me ask first, are there any personnel questions? There's not any real changes to that. It's just,
Right.
standard increase. So when it comes to the expenses, the first two line items are utilities and our fuel. Oh, hold on one second. I'm gonna let Nita in. All
Ready.
right. Hi, Nita.
Hello, everyone. Sorry for the late.
I
No
need it.
problem. Thank you for joining us. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, so
Back to where you were with the line items.
yep, so Nita, we were just about to go over the FY23 budget.
Okay.
So the first two line items are the utilities and the fuel. I know that the projected cost of fuel is not great for next year. I did have a conversation briefly with our facilities manager, Sean, and his thinking is in alignment with mine, that we might, right now we have budgeted just a flat, no increases for those line items. So I need to have a conversation with John Kader to decide how we want to tackle that, because the costs are probably going to increase in those line items. So I don't know if they want to tackle that at a townwide level, or if they want to see that reflected in the department budget. And John and I have not had that conversation yet, but I just wanted to draw your attention to that, because that number may change.
And I
Or
certainly
both.
hope it's a town-wide effort.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're not the only ones that use fuel
Right.
and electricity. So I just want to, before I don't want to unilaterally make any decisions. So I'm just going to kind of leave it up to him to decide if we want it reflected here, or if they're planning something already.
Excellent.
Let's see, the equipment maintenance. I'm going to flip back and forth. I have a lot of notes here. So under the equipment maintenance, the request went up, or that line item went up. We moved 3 expenses from other line items. So a
Right.
lot of the changes that that you'll see in this proposed budget is really just us moving money into different line items so that we can better track the expenses. And this is one of them. So the service calls for our computers is going into this line item. It was previously in contractual services, but that's not really accurate bookkeeping wise. As well as our mobile print and our LPT1 client, which those are for public printing. So they really, really belong in this equipment maintenance line item. So we've really just moved the money out of one and into the other.
Again, makes sense to me.
So Jen, one more question.
Sure.
So for the printing, you said, do you think public are still using that printing services, or is there any change?
I use
I'm
it.
not sure if I could really speak to the change in usage. I do know that the printer, both the mobile printing and printing from our public computers, is still popular, especially when it comes to tax season right now. We're still getting a fairly decent amount of requests for printing resumes, cover letters, other like official documents and things like that. So it is fairly steady.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions about the equipment maintenance?
Nope.
So the HVAC maintenance is zeroed out. And that is because it makes more sense to split that into the actual service contract.
And you're
Which was-
answering all my questions before I even asked them.
I had a feeling that you might all have the same questions. So what we've done is we've split the service contract out, and that's down in the next line item, down contractual services, where it really should go. And the repair line is being moved to repairs and maintenance. So rather than have a separate line item for HVAC maintenance, it's all really going under one. Does that should answer questions. We couldn't really figure out why it was separate, and it makes better sense to just kind of keep it all together.
If you remember,
So if
some of
we-
this wording are ancient, truthfully, how they were broken down. So
Yeah, and there's a well, you'll see when I get down to the line item in red, it's not accurate. So if you look at the next line item, contractual services, really what we've done is just moved the HVAC contract down into that line. The other expenses in that are the Best Pro cleaning, our web hosting, our CW Mars, half of that, network membership. And we've moved the technology consultant out of this line because it's not a contract, it's just hourly maintenance. So like I noted before, it got moved up into the equipment maintenance. We doing good so far?
okay with me. You've answered all three of my questions. So
Sweet.
Richard
All right,
should know
so-
all this too. He should remember some of that stuff. Ancient wording.
So the next one down is the telephone. That has been zeroed out because the town has gotten a new phone system and it's VoIP. So we don't need the telephone budget anymore. It's all through our internet. So we're good there. So we were able to zero that out. Office supplies, the only real changes there are, like I mentioned before, we moved the mobile print and LPT service maintenance, equipment maintenance out of office supplies because they're not really, they didn't really fit there. And in some years we had categorized them as office supplies, and in some years they were under a different line item. So we're just fixing that. Most of the things in this line item are the printer lease, which is the most substantial expense that we have. And then toners and miscellaneous expenses. So nothing too different, just moving a couple of things. Building maintenance, like I said, we moved the HVAC repair budget down into that to be consistent with all of our other repairs and maintenance. Custodial supplies, really no change. The books and periodicals. Oh, you know what? Let me go ahead and, there's a red line item
I was
that is
wondering about that.
materials. Yeah, materials and supplies is actually an older line item that was for grounds maintenance. So it's misnamed, but also it's something that's been zeroed out for a number of years. So it really just doesn't belong on this spreadsheet. But yeah, that's why it's there.
Will it
Um,
disappear from future budgets then?
That is more of a question for the accountant and the finance
Yeah.
director. I'm not really sure if it needs to stay on here for any kind of historical comparison or anything like that. But in future presentations to you, I can hide the line. That way Like, and I meant to.
It-
So it
it's
wasn't
it's more so
confusing.
that in 3 or 4 years, somebody doesn't look and say, "Oh no, we're not buying materials and supplies," and then someone has to look it up and they
Right.
mean lawn maintenance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I made a note to ask him if we can kind of take that off, but
Or rename it
if
or
it
something.
needs to stay
Yeah,
there for any
I was
reason,
just
I'll
going to say
find-
rename it or put a parentheses with something in there.
right.
Yeah.
So our books and periodicals, our actual materials supply lines, and our non-print media. The only change there is that because the MBLC requires 15% of our total budget be spent on materials in order to maintain our state certification, which allows us to participate in borrowing from other libraries and allows our Northborough residents to use other libraries in Massachusetts. It has to be 15% of that total. So those numbers are representing 15%. And like I said, if the utilities and fuel increase, there may need to be a small adjustment to that, but I'm not anticipating anything too wild there. Let's see. Our library supplies. Nothing really changing. It's different than office supplies because this is all for processing materials that go out to the public. So it makes sense to have it in a separate line item just to track the expenses there. Travel and mileage, not much of a change. Maybe we'll use the money this year. It seems like there are some in-person conferences happening around the region. So we'll probably use some of the travel money. Same with dues, it covers MLA and NELA memberships for our full-time librarians. Meetings, same thing. Not really any changes, just hopefully we'll actually have meetings to attend this year. Unclassified, which is like our first aid supplies, batteries, and just like small necessities. No change to that really, just it's a little less because we haven't been using all of the money in that budget. And the technology, really, I just need to budget for 3 new staff computers. Like I said, we have a new router, we have a new server, we have a lot of technology upgrades that have already happened. So $3,000 will be sufficient for next year unless any major catastrophe. Are there unanswered questions?
I'm
No.
good.
Hi.
You hit all 3 of mine, so.
Yay.
It's like a test. I studied really hard for it to make sure I understood.
I was mostly worried about the books and periodicals being level funded. But basically you've allocated the increase relative to the 15% to non-print.
Yep.
To ebooks primarily.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which makes sense given the demand.
Yep. The demand has skyrocketed for Overdrive.
Oh, yes.
And really any electronic materials that we can offer. So yeah, we've increased that, and there is a bit of an increase to there will end up being a little bit of an increase to the print. If I have to adjust the fuel and the utilities, I'll probably put it in the print budget.
All right. Any other questions about the budget? Any comments?
Very thorough, very good job.
It was much easier this year than last year.
And I applaud
Last
you.
year I was a deer in the headlights.
And yet you survived. You handled it fabulously.
Well, thank you.
All right.
All right.
Then should we move on to hoopla?
Should we?
Oh, I think your explanation was excellent. And I think the strategies that you're going to do to look into clarifying what they're doing, I think is really appropriate. So I don't know what else there is you need for us to tell you to do, really.
Nope, if anybody has any questions about, how their business model is working or anything like that, I'm happy to explain.
I just hope that as they're hearing from more and more libraries about this, that they recognize that their revenue model will go away if the libraries no longer want to use their service because of what they're doing.
Right.
My hope is it's just they're chasing dollars and they said, great, we can get, another 10,000 publishers. Who cares if we haven't heard about them? Who cares what they publish? We'll be able to say we have that many new books.
Yep.
And I'm aware of businesses that have done things like that. And maybe they'll backtrack from that and be a little bit more careful. I hope so. It's frustrating. I use Hoopla frequently. And I think it's been to me a very good service and a good app to use, but they can't have that stuff on there.
Right. Yeah, I think maybe they got too big too fast, and took a hit on their quality control as a result. It kind of sounds like they have a network or some kind of third-party vendor that adds the publishers
Right.
for them, as opposed to them individually contracting with publishers. So I think there's a lot of layers here that need to be kind of monitored a little bit better. And then it begs a good question too, of when you have an electronic collection and physical space is no longer an issue, when do you make decisions to deselect and weed things out? So almost as important as having a robust selection policy, when things become outdated, you want to make sure that they're not in the collection anymore. And that's something that we have always done with our physical collection. So hearing, when you're finding science books and medical tech books from 1993, it's a little much.
Yeah.
So I don't know, again, I don't know if those were put on the air by somebody else and it just sort of escaped their net or what. So hopefully the request for transparency will come through. Their customer service has always been really, really spectacular. I've been using Hoopla. I think they started in 2011, and I'm pretty sure that Boylston added the service. I think we added it in 2012. So, we've really seen that collection grow. And I've had a long relationship with them. So I'm really hopeful that they take us seriously and really spend some time understanding what the issue is, because it's really not an issue of censorship or of a value decision based on content. It's just, authoritative sources, avoiding disinformation. And like I said, just some of the more questionable publishers that don't really exist outside of the Hooplaverse, things like that. So I think they want to do better. And I hope that we get some better answers soon, because they did take down the most egregious publishers, but there's still quite a bit out there that's really, really outdated and beyond what I would consider questionable. So I hope
Well, this stuff isn't going to go away. And I think your idea of having a deep dive into the collection development policy is a very, very good idea. And that will enable us to at least think about how we control the content that we put out as a library to our patrons here in Northborough. And I also think, following the lead of the Worcester Public Library is also a very good idea. They've got more resources than we have, and they're obviously aware of this problem as well. And so keeping them in our sites is a good thing too. So.
And I had a conversation with the Worcester director, and they spend, it's about $1.5 million that
Wow.
they're withdrawing from Midwest Tape until further notice. So they felt comfortable that they could, I guess, use their bigger platform to kind of speak for some of the smaller libraries in the area that are a little more dependent on Hoopla. Because, I mean, I'll tell you, you could spend hours and hours and hours digging through their holdings, trying to evaluate what's on there. And it's not something that most of us have time to do.
And then multiply that times every library.
Right.
Really,
Yeah.
it's too
Yeah.
much of a challenge to bear.
Right. Even with, like, we've created a spreadsheet and given edit rights to a few different people. So as other people are doing work and they find, 30-year-old science books, they're putting them on this spreadsheet so that we can all go in and look, but still the effort to go in and individually block titles when there's so many that are just well outdated. It's a lot of work. So it's essentially becoming an unusable product if we want to maintain our collection standards and the trust that we have in our community. So
You haven't mentioned it, but, and I haven't followed it closely enough, but ALA must have taken a position on this. And do they have a statement, and are they giving you guidance that you can follow? And
as of yet, they have not issued a statement. My understanding from colleagues that are on different ALA committees is that statements that take a position, especially against vendors, take a long time to curate and craft and finalize. So we may not see anything. I know that the Public Library Association conference is coming up later this month, which is, it's put on by ALA. So they will probably have, I know there are several association leaders that have requested meetings with Hoopla or with Midwest Tape. So I would expect that that more will be coming maybe in April.
okay,
I have a curiosity question just about Hoopla operations. Do you get reports? I know you get reports as to how many books. Do you get detailed breakdown as far as what the books are that our patrons are using from Hoopla? I don't want the names. I don't think you would get the names, but I'm curious if you could see, 4 people read this book, 3 people saw this movie, or if you just say, it just says 400 books and 300 movies. I'm making up the numbers.
Trying to think, most of the stats just give me breakdowns by category. And there's some stats on like you can see how many people used an Android device or an iPhone or things like that. The other way that you can go in is to look at the title, and you can see if somebody's checked out the title.
Okay.
But it doesn't offer that immediately that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But that would be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, part of my curiosity is, do we have Northborough patrons that are impacted by the odd titles that they have?
So far, the titles that I have deselected from our Hoopla offerings have not been checked out by any Northborough residents.
Okay.
So I'm hopeful at least that I found it before anybody else did. I know that the person who brought the initial problem to our attention was a patron at another nearby library who was just, a little shocked. That might be an understatement. So I would not necessarily want our community to see this collection and think that it's representative of the collection quality that we have.
Yeah, I know how much time and effort you and your staff put into making sure that our collection is a good one.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll pass that on. We take pride in it and we work hard on it. So
yeah, it's important. And it's something that I don't think I even fully appreciated until I started to pay more attention to how libraries worked from the inside, rather than just going in to find nice books. I realized that, well, if I'm going to find nice books, people need to work really hard to make sure that the selection is good, so we can
Mhm.
find the things that are enjoyable to us.
It isn't
Yeah, and-
magic. It's good hard work.
Good hard work, indeed.
And it's constant, and we
Mhm.
find our own, we have to be really cognizant of our own bias, and our own, sometimes we weed things, or books get damaged or taken out of the collection for one reason or another. So we have to periodically go back through and make sure that everything is balanced, because we do want the collection to truly represent our community, and all of the different ideas. So it's a lot of work. There's a lot of reading and research that goes in behind the scenes to build those carts and purchase those items. So it's always a process.
Mhm. All right. If we're all pretty comfortable with the hoopla situation, do you want to say anything about the Be Well Northborough programs, or?
Let's see. I am going to be presenting, I believe, at the selectmen's meeting on Monday, just to help kind of finalize the idea. We've been fleshing this out for the last couple of months. So I will have more information for this board and more, not tasks necessarily, but because we do want it to have public input through our boards, and for this to be a really collaborative effort, it will probably be on a future agenda, April or May.
Okay.
But we're really excited about it. We approved a logo yesterday.
Ooh,
So it's fun to see it start to come together.
awesome. All right, that is about the most thorough discussion that we have had of the director's report.
It's our longest meeting to date.
Yes. So having done the library director's report, is there any other old business that we need to cover? Because if there isn't, we had left open the idea of when we would go back to have meetings in person. I believe that the current emergency situation would allow us to have one more remote meeting.
It has been extended till July 15th.
Thank you. I was sure that that was going to happen. So the discussion is, do we want to meet in person, or do we want to continue to meet remotely? We only put on here for the April meeting because we knew that was like now that the library is open and the mask mandate is down, we could have an in-person meeting pretty easily. But if people would feel better, be more comfortable, at least having the next one remote, we could do that. Does
I
anyone
would love to have, oh, I'm sorry, Michelle.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, does anybody have a comment? Or?
I would love to have in-person meetings. Unfortunately, April 12th is a very important day in my life, and I will not be either Zooming or coming in person.
Oh, no. All right. So regardless, you're not going to be there. Thanks. I'm making a note of that, Mary.
Yeah, well,
You owe me a
you
meeting.
can send me a card.
All right, I will. Does anybody else would anyone else like to voice a yes, Mitch?
I have two conflicting opinions. One is I would love to have in-person meetings because I miss everybody and I think we do very good business together. The downside of in-person meetings that we have at least held in the past is they were not covered. They're not available for people to watch later. And I think that has been a very good asset to the community. I think we talked about that a little bit a few months ago when we talked about how to have our meetings when there was an option to do other things. So I don't know if you've heard anything from town administrator or anything else about, or from cable about any option for an in-person meeting in the library to be covered. So personally, I would lean towards making it available for the public rather than making it better for us.
And I'm going to take the opposing view to that one. Sometimes you really do need to have in-depth pros and cons about articles that you may not want the public to hear quite yet. They can see two sides of an issue, but sometimes in a trustees meeting, you really need to be able to vent your opinion and vent perhaps a contrary opinion to what is being proposed without having it negatively affect the whole board in any way.
I look forward to having a lengthy discussion in person with you about that, because I
Absolutely.
have very strong opinions about such things.
Yes,
On or off film, on.
that's
I-
off.
Yeah, I'm happy
between
to have
Mitch
it
and
on.
That's between Mitch and I.
I think that the meeting in public or meeting via Zoom, in my opinion, is entirely based on the pandemic issues. And that when the pandemic goes away, we have an obligation to meet publicly, to be upfront about everything, and to allow the public to come into our meetings when they want to. So I think the issue is whether we meet in public or whether we meet on Zoom. I think the issue is based entirely on the safety and the pandemic issues. So I would suggest my option would be I would opt for one more meeting via Zoom, the April meeting, and then let's take it month by month and see how things go.
Excellent.
I agree with that.
I would find
I
that
agree
acceptable.
also.
You agree
I
as well,
agree with
John?
that too. Yeah,
Yes,
All right, so it sounds like the April meeting will be remote. Everyone is in agreement. I don't think that we have to do a motion or do a roll call. So the next meeting will be remote. And unless there's any other discussion or any other issues that people want to bring up, it brings us to the date of the next meeting, which is April.
Can I just say one more thing? If
Sure.
we do in-person meetings, the public is invited to actually physically come to all those in-person meetings, as to
Yes.
agree with what Jim just said. And that's always been the case.
Yes.
Right.
All right. So clarified, the next meeting will be April 12th at 7 o'clock. And it will be a remote meeting. And if there isn't any other business before the board, the chair would welcome a motion to adjourn the meeting. If someone would like to do that.
I'll make a motion to adjourn a meeting.
Thank you, Nita. Do I have
I'll
someone?
second that. I'll second that.
Thanks, Jim. All right, do a roll call vote to adjourn the meeting at 7:39 PM. Mitch Cohen,
Mitch Cohen, aye.
Mary Crowley,
Mary Crowley, aye.
Jim Hogan,
Jim Hogan, aye.
Nita Karanjkar,
Rita Karanjkar, aye.
Joan Scott,
Joan Scott, aye.
Richard Tucker,
Richard Tucker, aye.
and I, Michelle Rehill, vote to adjourn the meeting technically at 7:40 PM.